Houston, Texas, and so I'm glad to be a voice here today. H-Town in the room, I see in the back. Yes, I'm an entertainment lawyer. Before I was a lawyer, I was an actress. I've been in the arts since I was, like 5 years old or something, so I'm very much in the arts. I'm a TV and film producer. I founded a nonprofit called Impact, which is MAC Performing Arts Collective, where we give assistance to those in performing and visual arts and create a platform to make you successful in the business. And I'm a playwright and an author of a entertainment book. So hopefully I can share some words of wisdom here today for you.
Thank you. Carter?
Hello. Thank you for having me, Felix. It's great to be here. I'm Carter Pilcher. I also am not a Washington, D.C. native. I came the other direction to Jaylene. I came from London. I run a company that distributes short movies. It's called
first question I'd like to ask of Hailey and Jaylene, talent agencies today are presenting their a package of not only the scriptwriter, the director, the talent that's associated with the project, and when they basically bring it to a studio, it's kind of a turnkey operation. And we're talking about sort of the major, films that we see marketed through the major film studios. How can we sort of unbundle or encourage the industry to not have everything locked up at the very start of a film? Because if everything is locked up, the only thing that you add are peripheral things. And that's why so many actors of color are marginalized in those big films, because they are the afterthought, because the core of it is already sold, and the big parts, the parts that really are relevant to the plot, are taken. How do you developing highly?
It's interesting that you bring that question up, because this has always been the problem, and I don't think anything's going to change anytime soon. The person who writes the check controls everything. It starts with the funding. It really does. As far as trying to break those packages up, it's really tough to challenge. I'm in agreement with Victoria in that we certainly have to put our own people in place. I am the producer of a TV series that is also on the UMC network, and it's called Fifth Ward. It'll come out in November, so I hope you guys binge watch that. But it's also, it's also a Black director, Black showrunner, Black creator, Black writers, people of color just in general. Our DP was an Asian woman. And so when we gain the power to put ourselves in those positions, that obviously works to our benefit, and we can break up those packages. But it's just a tough thing to do. The major studios, they are who they are. They've been around since like the 1940s, and they've had that type of leverage since then. I don't think that we're in a position as of yet to really infiltrate that system. It tends to work well when you have A-level, multi-million-dollar actors attached. There's a disparity in how they pay women and men of color in the arts, and so there's very few at the top of the food chain that can, demand the 20 million a picture or the 30 million a picture or whatever. There's just a few of those people, so they're not locking packages around our actors that just don't demand those kind of prices. And there are a lot of people of color who want to simply work, and they need to pay their bills. And so if we were in better position to demand those kind of rates, to either be a part of those, all of us be a part of those packages, that would be great. I just think that there's more time, more considerations that have to be done, but at the end of the day, it's the person who controls the funding, the entities that control the funding that control those packages, and I just don't see right now how we're going to infiltrate that on a monetary level. But obviously our voices are meant to be heard. We have to continue to complain, but we also have to continue to do the things that we can do at the grassroots level to position ourselves to own our own companies, to be a Robert Johnson who started BET and now has the RLJ channel that has the umbrella of the UMC channel, allowing our voices to be heard, our stories to be told, and to put all of our people in place on an independent level. So that's a nutshell answer.
Thank you. Hailey?
My brother, I don't want to be rude, but I don't think people know what I do, and I think I'm put in the wrong place. I'm not here to gossip about Hollywood, because I don't think even white people in Hollywood know what Hollywood is all about. So for me, this is a voodoo hoodoo discussion that has nothing to do with reality. And your question, and I don't want to be rude, has nothing to do with me. I am a filmmaker who determines my own destiny, even if I only make one film every 100 years. This is very important. So I felt like even not coming from the jump, because I felt in that some of the blips I was getting, I'm maybe in the wrong place, and I don't like to be rude to people. A lot of black people fantasize. I don't like to fantasize. I've gotten over that 40 years ago. Thanks to the whole Black Liberation Front, I am a free person. I don't think about Hollywood day and night. I don't even, this whole question does not apply to me. I make film independently because I do believe black people have to be in charge of their destiny. If not, we will remain beggars, complainers of everything. Now, it's not to say I think black people who are in Hollywood fighting like hell, power to them. I don't discourage. I always say, in every way we got to get in and do what we can. I have chosen to make film outside white people's power structure. This is critical for me and my wife, who's also a filmmaker. We make films, humble films. And so for me, I think this vertical mobility idea of black people needs to be critically discussed. I think my dream is that black people, without being racist, will always build a bank where I could go for a loan to make a film about my grandmother, and don't look stranger to want to make a film about my grandmother. I would like black producers. I would like black distributors, not because I'm racist, but because I don't think my grandmother's wrinkle will be a macro problem and as to the credibility of the story. For me, non-white people in America, Native Americans above all, Chicanos in California, whom I went to school with, we have to build an independent, non-racist, hopefully, because if we become racist, we become the monster. But I feel our film should be about our humanity. Everything that has been suppressed has to now, thanks to our skill, imagination, we need to tell the stories. So for me to go to a white guy and say, I want to make a film about my grandmother who actually shot your great-great-grandfather with Nat Turner and killed his children. That's a very, 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 very crazy position to be in my view. I'd like to go to a black producer and say, I think Nat Turner's story is very important. Because I think little black kids should know they have to be history makers. So this kind of thing, it puts me in the wrong direction. I don't want to torpedo.
No. I'm excited to hear what you tell your students, because your students must ask you for advice about which direction to go. And it seems like this is the advice that you tell them.
No, I don't give prescription. What I tell my students, I train them good, and I say, decide, and for your decision, face the consequences and change as you grow older. This is what I say, because I don't like to tell my students not to try. For me, Hollywood itself doesn't exist anymore. It's become multinational corporations. Some of the power bases in Singapore. China is going to be a base. How are black people going to keep up if we don't build our economic structure to produce our own image, our own story? We are the most immediate responsible people in painting our images, in putting monument in our images. In doing so, we heal ourselves as an artist, and we heal the collective community by also equally journeying the journey we took as filmmakers. That's a different kind of planet. As far as I'm concerned, it's the hardest one. Excuse me.
I would like to.
It is the hardest one, but it's the most important challenge for black people. Are we going to determine our destiny, saving our own money? I made a film called Sankofa. I expected black people, thank you. I expected black people to come and say to me, what is the next thing you want to do? There was no black capitalists that are culturally formatted in the right direction to come and say to me, I like your film. Over 1 million black people have embraced me. Thank God, that I needed that embrace. But I did not see a single vertically empowered black person with capital come and say to me, now what do you want? Because that's what white people do. Terrence Malick, white people go to him and say, what's your next movie? I like someday that to be the reality of the little black kids coming in the future. And thank you, I don't want to dominate.
Thank you.
I think he's very much in the right room, don't you agree?
Thank you. Yes, I just want to acknowledge.
I
just wanted to acknowledge that the Congressman Hank Johnson is here with us, and if you want to say a few words. Thank you, Congressman. Victoria.
Nice tie. I just want to Thank you, Professor, for the remarks. My journey is in filmmaking very independent, even though I've lived in the strata and worked in the strata of corporate America. I mean, Sony's a Japanese company, right? So, you know, that's a whole interesting cultural base as well, historically, in our nation, and how some Japanese people see themselves, whether a minority or not. But nonetheless, when I created The Rich and the Ruthless, my goal was to work in Jamaica as well. And my father's Jamaican, though I don't know him, and actively doing the search. And it was very interesting. I went to Jamaica. I made it very clear I was going to Jamaica. And then I found out that I had to pay a premium to take American actors out of the United States to shoot in Jamaica. And I have to pay down that debt. And I'm going to do it. But it was shocking to me that here I am trying to go back to a route off of the three sides of Africa that I'm from, which is Jamaica. And I found that really incredible, that I'm trying to do business, because I can't do business in the States to the extent that I absolutely should. I have 8 projects on my slate, and I was in that machine the professor spoke about. And they looked at me like I had a third eye when I said, I want to make my movie, The Ugly Queen. Well, what's that? Well, that's about the woman that lived in Buckingham House before it was Buckingham Palace, the first queen in Buckingham Palace, Queen Charlotte, married to King George III, who was of African descent, a German woman from Mecklenburg, Germany. Well, you can't be serious. I'm very serious. What would be unserious about this story? But that is just a story that is so far beyond the thinking that a black woman was the first queen in Buckingham Palace. Can't get that story made. An incredible movie about a black, well-heeled political family out of D.C. whose daughter, who was an equestrian, develops opioid addiction. And over, Bravo and Life, all of them, well, they actually can't come up with the words, why? So I continue. We have to make sure that church is not the only form of philanthropy in our culture. We have to make sure that we're also supporting these incredible projects that we're attempting to manifest. But not only that, we need global distribution deals. We need not only global distribution deals, but we also have to access economic inclusion and independent economic partners. I can tell you that I have reached to the very ends and will continue. And I go back and back and back, and I've at HBO's optioned my memoir, The Women Who Raised Me, twice. I want to tell you this very quickly. They said, we want a New York City playwright, black or gay. I got Lynn Nottage, who you know is a MacArthur Genius Awardee. She is a Guggenheim, anyway, go on and on. This incredible black playwright. Ruined, Intimate Apparel, she's brilliant. And I got her, and I went back to HBO and I said, I have Lynn Nottage, and they said, you what? Shocked. And I got Lynn Nottage, and we got the contract, and we're ready to go. I've got Alfre Woodard, I've got Gloria Rubin, I've got Felicia Rashad, I've got Jane Fonda. We're ready to rock and roll to create The Women Who Raised Me. And then you know what HBO said? We need her to move from Brooklyn to New York. I'm sorry, from Brooklyn to LA. And I knew right then they were starting to pick and kill the deal. Because here I have one of the world's greatest playwrights who's willing to do this project. And she doesn't want to move to LA. She can't stand LA. She lives in Brooklyn. She has a daughter. She has a family. So what is this really about? What it ended up being, how it all turned out very quickly, is that they hired, I presented 4 brilliant black writers, but they ended up going with a British white woman. And I went and I begged them, practically, to the professor's point. I said, I need to go sit with this woman, because she doesn't know where the A train goes. So I need to sit with this woman and talk with her. And then they said, she wants no notes from you. And of course, the script came back horrific. And of course, the deal was dead, but they knew they killed the deal back when they were asking Lynn Nottage to uproot herself and relocate to Los Angeles, which was never going to happen. So you go on this wild goose chase. I was willing to do the chase, to be honest with you. I was willing to go the distance, because I'm going to prove to you how ridiculous you are. So, yeah.
Carter?
Yeah, sorry. I just along those same lines, I would say we're the largest distributor of short movies in the world. And all of our young filmmakers are people who made their films independently, who've raised their own capital separately and outside the studio system. And probably one of the biggest problems in Hollywood for us has been big actors. If we get a big actor in a film, in a short film, even if they've given their time, when we started doing business, they were not allowed really to sell the film. There was no way you could monetize it because of the huge payments that you would have to make for a Hollywood actor to release the film, to settle, even if the actor didn't want to be paid and had agreed not to be paid, that there was no way for them to release the film. We have since, after years of work, negotiated a separate type of deal for actors being released in special films that we work with the Screen Actors Guild. But I would say, on the one hand, the unions in Hollywood are very good at protecting folks that are in the system. At the same time, they are so big and so difficult that it makes it impossible for Black, Hispanic, emerging filmmakers to get any kind of film made. And I think packages is an issue for the huge movies, but I think the unions have to open up, come up with new ways. If UMC is going to fund a TV show that's a marginal TV show and going to and is a risky business decision and is going to a small audience and maybe will make its money back, they shouldn't have to pay the same kind of union rates because all the people who are on the show are hopeful that it will work. They shouldn't be bound by that. They should be able to sell it internationally. They should be able to do all kinds of things to try to recoup their investment, to make it more interesting for people to invest in projects like Victoria's project, like Hailey's project. All of those structures that protect actors who are making $20 million in a Marvel production work against actors who are making $10,000 in a little series that they want to get off the ground. So I think packages maybe a problem, unions, and the way the probably unintended effect of what they do, but there has to be some way to get around their current restrictions because it keeps most of the talent at levels that nobody except HBO can afford. And then you can't just say where Victoria becomes powerful is if she can say, you know what, HBO, I've gotten all these people to do this, and thank you very much. If you don't want to do it, you know what, that's all fine, because I have 14 other investors who are interested, and we're just going to walk over and do it with them. And at that point, HBO says, whoa, 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 do not walk out that door, because that is something very exciting for us. So if we want to empower our independent, young, emerging filmmakers and emerging talents like Victoria, it has to be by breaking the rules, creating a new set of rules that allow talent to get out there.
I'm looking for a distribution deal in the UK. Can you help me?
I sure could.
Okay, we'll talk.
Yeah, here's the other part of this equation, which is we have to have an audience to see our films. And this year, the Motion Picture Association of America issued their 2016 theatrical statistical report. And when you combined the African American, Asian American, and Latino audience, it was 48% of that audience. So somehow, we are going to the box office more often than not. Now this summer, there was a drop in 25% in those blockbuster films. But the dynamics are changing. I mean, streaming has changed so much of what's going on, and this ability to be able to see on-demand projects, and then other things. Tracy was talking yesterday about urban films and about how small independent films have a place there on your network. How do we sort of create media literacy to the audience to have them understand that you can put your dollar behind that blockbuster, the Marvel film, or you can choose to kind of learn more about culture and identity and self through some of these independent films? How do we sort of switch the choice factor?
I'll take a stab at that. One thing I wanted to say was, based on the percentages, obviously we need to know specifically the reason behind why people didn't go to more movies during the summer. But I will say, in the words of Maxine Waters, I am reclaiming my time. And I say that because we love convenience. So if we don't have to go to the movies, if we don't have to leave our houses, we don't want to do that. We want our time to do other stuff. We want to watch a blockbuster while we wash clothes or whatever the case might be. Now, I'm on the side that I want you to go to the movies, don't get me wrong. But the consumer in me loves the convenience of all the streaming platforms. So I can't tell you that I didn't go see whatever because I'm black, or I don't understand the importance of movie making and I don't see the end product as important. That's not necessarily it. It's because I have Netflix on my phone. It's because I have Amazon Fire Stick. It's because I have YouTube and all these other things, right? And the summer months, as a parent, we're really busy. And we want to go on vacations, and we're picking and choosing what we do with our kids and stuff. So there's a lot of other factors, I think, that influence those numbers. And so it works to our advantage. It works against us. Now, do the big studios take that much of a hit? Probably not, because they're not having to spend the marketing dollars like they used to get you out. Where do you get all your news from first? Facebook. How do you find out what's coming out? A friend tells you, they tag you, Instagram, it's something. So the marketing dollars are not being spent like they used to be. Word of mouth still works, period, point blank. Nothing can take the place of that. Everybody wants to know about a good pair of shoes, and we find that out from a friend. So if it's a good deal, you're gonna pass the word. I do think it just comes down to now, we're up against convenience. Everything's right there. How many people have a big TV in the house anymore, like in each room? We're just averaging flat, one flat screen in a den, and that's pretty much it because everybody's watching it on their TV, their iPad, etc. So I think that's really where the challenge is, to create something that gets people out of their house or off their phone. And some of the studios are doing it by adding bars, by adding bowling alleys. They're adding other things to the studio, the movie experience outside of the house. So I think that's really the challenge, more than educating people on the importance of supporting films. And I just want to add this one point to tie into something that we were just talking about in terms of the independence of filmmaking. When it comes to funding, I think there's some grassroots things that still need to be done in terms of people of color recognizing that movies are commodities, just like Coca-Cola and toilet paper, and to support us in the beginning of films giving us $1 for an investment as opposed to showing up in the theaters only to see the movies. Are there independent filmmakers in the audience? How many? Okay. Do you know how hard it is you guys know how hard it is to get somebody to invest? You might get your mom to give you $10, but you really need, Mr. Frank, who owns the car dealership, to give you $10,000, right? It's very hard for people who are not in the industry to understand what you're doing. So it's hard for them to part with that dollar on the beginning side when you're looking for funding. But on the end, when your movie makes the theaters, they get it. Because, oh my God, you did it. And you're in the theaters with Marvel movies, and you're in the theaters with, Will Packer movies, et cetera, right? So I think there's a little bit of convincing that we still have to do at a grassroots level to explain to people how it works. This dollar that you're investing in me is not just investing in me as a service, but my goods that I'm going to put out, the movie itself, that will also help with that, getting our movies out, our projects out.
I just want to acknowledge that Tichina has just joined us. If you would just give us a few words about yourself, everyone else introduce themselves, and we'd love to have you do the same.
Oh, well, hello, everybody. I guess I didn't sneak in too well, huh?
No.
Well, my name is Tashina Arnold. I'm presently on a show called Survivor's Remorse. I play the role of Cassie. Thank you. I'm also on a show called Daytime Divas. God is good. I'm working. And I'm here just to, just to be a part of this panel, and we'll talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Victoria, did you have something to add to that topic?
And also, we go way back.
We go way back. I'm going to get you on my show, The Rich and the Ruthless. I know I'm going to get you to do a little cameo there. I'm not going to get a yes right now, but maybe I will. Okay, let's talk about it. I put it right there on the table. Tashina knows. I just overall, I think that we covered that particular piece. But again, it goes back to the independent financing, and independent financing gets us our own press. It costs money. Regardless of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, you still have to fly somewhere. We had to fly here to be on this panel and stay at a hotel and take the Uber and had to get child care and doggy care, whatever you had to do. There's an investment to get us in this chair. And that is something we don't have a surplus of. We do not tend to have that discretionary income so that we can go to the television awards in Cannes, France that Prince Albert founded. Don't I want to go? Of course I do. We can't get to Sundance and Telluride and Tribeca, and there are fees that you have to pay. And there's a commerce within the structure of awards competition that we're exempt from many times as small independent productions, whether it's film or digital television, the ISA 8s or Emmy Digital. Those tickets cost $700 to just get on the red carpet. So we're talking about a level of income, a level of investment, whether it's UMC or any other company. I'm not talking about the big networks and the big streaming companies, but I'm talking about us, and I'm talking about our rich content that deserves to have a place in the competition. We need to get into the ring, and we're at a deficit there. So we really have to talk about investing in ourselves, investing in, I actually don't like the word minority. I don't like it. But for the sake of conversation, because I think it's disempowering, but let me just say this, that we need film funds that address the movies such as Madam C.J. Walker and the first jockeys that won Churchill Downs and these rich, Marcus Garvey. Where is that movie? Where is James Baldwin? Where are these movies that Hollywood don't want to tell? They want to tell us, they want to tell stories about us being enslaved and sex slaves and pulling weaves out. And they want to tell these horrific stories that degrade us as a people. And we have an opportunity, I believe we have an opportunity, even in this Trumpian era, where we can really pull together. And we can really look at ourselves and say, I don't want that. I have all of this choice, and I choose different. But if you subscribe to trash television, they're going to keep making it because it's cheap to make and it cheapens us.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the lowest common denominator kind of programming, where they feel that it's insulting to see the content, and yet it's also equally unnerving to see the audience that does watch it. So it's like a double-edged sword. That's why I'm talking a little bit about media literacy and trying to basically explain to the audience why certain portrayal harmed them in their daily life and harmed their kids as they grow up in their daily life. But Tichina, I was hoping that you could tell us about your journey, because I think that you can talk about going against the grain and then finally becoming the mainstream. And that's so often what we have to do. Is we're often told that we're really outside of what the general public wants to watch, only to become what the general public wants to watch.
Right. Well, just a little bit of my background. I started off in show business at age 11. I got my equity card at age 11. So show business is all I've done. It's been, you know, that's all I've made money. I've never worked at McDonald's. My father made me work on his icy truck. He had a little icy wagon that he made for me because he wanted me to teach me how to have a real job, or a serving job. And the mainstream constantly changes. What is the mainstream?
That's exactly right.
And if you try to go, or if you try to live your life by the mainstream, you will be constantly frustrated and disappointed. I think because I started at an early age, and because show business was all I knew, I've seen so many things come and go. And I've seen people come and go, producers, directors, they don't really get fired, they just kind of move around. People that used to deliver my scripts are now people like John Ridley. You know, the people that are, I've just seen a whole scope of things in the industry just evolve in different ways. And it's hard. I think as an actress, I made a decision that because this is my life's work, I have to start investing correctly in it and in myself. And so I really don't care about being a star. I care about the legacy. I care about doing good work. What do I leave when I die? What will people remember me by? And especially having a child now, I have a responsibility. Victoria and I look up to her. You know, she broke down barriers before I have even knew no, seriously. But it's our sisterhood. It's not her looking at me like, God, I don't want you to make it, Tashina. No, it's never about that. She's gonna have her success, I'm gonna have my level of success, but it's hard. And I just was on a panel earlier today, and you know, we have to force people to pay attention to diversity. I mean, because we are so diverse as a people. We come in all different colors and sizes and shapes, and our stories, the Black female story is just limitless. Yes. You know, we have so many stories to tell, and it's my responsibility to make sure that I fight for a Black female to be in the writer's room. It's my responsibility to say, you know what, I'm not going to say this, and take the chance at being fired. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. So I have reached that level of success where I can, because people have already invested in me and I've proven myself. So I do take that responsibility very well, and I try to train other young people behind me. Hey, listen, you can do it too, but you got to put your time in. You got to know what you're doing. You got to make everything is about relationships. But it's hard, but we've got a long road ahead of us. And it's not an easy road, and I'm happy that we're even talking about it, you know? Congressman Johnson, hi. I'm here because he and I had a conversation at dinner. And he said, you're gonna do my panel? I'm like, well, hell yeah, I'm gonna do your panel. But that's what it takes. It takes conversing and really connecting and trying to come up with solutions.
Well, you know, you mentioned John Ridley, who, as many know, won the Oscar for 12 Years a Slave, and was the creator of American Crime on ABC. And John wrote some of the most compelling characters on both the African-American side and the Latino side. And I must say that, you know, I was riveted by every season of that show, and it was unfortunately canceled, and a large part because it didn't have the ratings, but it was a darling of the critics. And I think that is sort of the future of, you know, being able to encourage people to watch those shows, even now on demand. I think that's really responsible. But who else do you see as up-and-coming filmmakers and people to watch, and people who are kind of really doing it and making their mark in film?
Can I I think, and this is possibly to go back to the professor's earlier comments, I think that Hollywood as a thing will always be making some big movies. They will always be out there. But in my view, as far as what's happening outside the United States, but especially what's happening here, there is this enormous change. And talking about the structures of Hollywood, if you're over 40, is an interesting and informative discussion. But if you're under 40, if you're under 30, if you're under 20, most of everything you consume has nothing to do with Hollywood at all. Nothing. It's not like maybe one movie a year, 2 movies a year a kid sees. The rest of it, 6 hours a day, is something like the average TV video consumption, has nothing to do with anything that anyone in this room made, or anyone we know or anyone we've ever heard of. So it's scary for Hollywood, for the way that things have been, but it's exciting. And for the African American community, for smaller communities that have not had a voice, it should be the time when that voice is able to be heard and we're able to do new projects. You know, our entire company is built on the idea that emerging talent and emerging ideas are way more cool and fun and exciting than, you know, the 15th Spider-Man series. You know, I mean, of course, I go watch Spider-Man, every one of the 15 versions, but it's not exciting. It's not exciting in the same way and breathtaking as something that's new and emerging, a story from within our culture and from new and unique places. So I just want to say that I think it's very important that we think not in terms of the current structure, but I think we should be thinking really about how we take advantage of this amazing new thing that is happening in America. And that is all this young new talent and young new audiences that are not paying any attention whatsoever to Hollywood.
I'd like.
I would just like to acknowledge that Reverend Jesse Jackson has just joined us. And the Reverend knows in 1999, the Los Angeles Times broke the story that all the 4 major networks had not a single person of color cast on any one of their shows, which led the Reverend and many other advocates to address that directly with the industry. And since that time, the industry has made incredible progress, but for the work of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. May I invite you to give us some words of wisdom? Would you like to speak from here, from the podium?
No.
Okay.
Well, I'm anxious to hear more about this. I think that what is so very clear, we have talent in the market, we need capital. At the end of the day, it's investors and those who can greenlight, capital and power. There is no talent shortage, there's an opportunity shortage. And that's why hearing what they have to say, because the question becomes, when they give us whereas therefore, what are we going to do about it? Because it goes back to who will lend and invest. People lend and invest in people they know and trust and like. Don't know us, don't trust, don't like us, nothing really happens. And so I want to be a part of the next phase of this, which is lending and investing. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you.
I want to.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Victoria, you about to say something?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just want to remind people about, many of you know my footprint is in soap opera, and which, thank you, which started in 1934. I was always about the business metrics. Started in 1934, 15-minute segments on radio to sell Procter & Gamble Oxydol soap to housewives. And then the advent of television, and then soap operas. And so I wrote an op-ed called 600 Years a Slave, because there's been 600 years of aggregate soap opera on network television and not a single black executive producer. 600 years. of network television. Billions of dollars. African American spending annually is at 1.3 trillion. Add to that Asian and Hispanic spending. We are consumer viewers, as that word minorities. And make no mistake, we are at over 3 trillion annually in spending. And what do we have to show for that as consumer viewers? So I understand that those big buildings in Cincinnati, Ohio, that started making soap out of pig fat, I understand that I helped them sell a lot of soap, but I was always about the business aspects of it. We're not going to get that advertising money the way that we would want it. The boxcar advertising, first commercial out, last commercial back in, they're not going to give it to our independent products. But we can certainly go out there, as Reverend Jackson said, and get our investors. You got to hit that rock till it cracks open. I went out every day, and I go out every day. I work on the weekends. I try to find investors because they're out there, but they have to be convinced, and we have to really look at ourselves and ask ourselves, are we going to continue to buy, and I love Starbucks, don't get me wrong, but are we going to spend the money, and this is just a general statement, on Starbucks and other stuff instead of investing in what we want to see in advertising? Do we want to invest in $4.99 a month on UMC.TV? That's like $50 for the year. I mean, what is that really? Is that a tank of gas, really? And you're not going to invest in that so that you promote other black filmmakers. We really have to look at ourselves, why we aren't buying that subscription. You know, we have to just look at that, whether I'm on UMC or not. The point is that that's a fact in our face about an investment of that nature that could make so much magic happen for us. So get your subscription, ladies and gentlemen.
You mentioned a smaller community. And me as an actress, I was told so many years, they kept from me my foreign market value. And they don't, you know, the producers, the executives, the people that pay me, they like to keep that from actors because they don't want you to know your own value. But no longer, since social media and since the click of a button where you can go or literally show yourself around the world, we're really not a small community. We are, which is why I hate the word minority. I found out, I mean, there's over 200 million black people in Brazil, and most of my fans are there. I have more fans in Brazil than I do in America. So we need to kind of change the way we even describe ourselves as far as in the industry as, you know,
Africa, and Africa's the fastest growing market.
I mean,
It's-
black and brown people, and we're consumers.
Yeah.
So it's a huge community. It really is, and we just know we need to nurture it correctly. We need to nurture it. We need to feed it what it wants and not feed it what we think it should have.
And that is exactly the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
Is that in the Hollywood power structure, it's viewed as not a big enough community to be invested in
Right.
separately. But the
Yeah, it's all by design. It's just frustrating.
but it's becoming but now with all this new media, you know, there are ways for us to get our products out. UMC, I'm sure Bob Johnson is not thinking this is going to just be an American project. And I'm sure he's thinking that he's going to be distributing this all over the world, and it will be a huge business.
I mean, RLJ Entertainment has offices in Australia, in London, and your licensing deals. The licensing deals can be in a whole assortment of territories, whether it's the United States, Canada, the Caribbean Basin, whatever the
Right.
structure is. But believe me, RLJ Entertainment is an international entity. So look it up.
So I think it's very exciting that those kind of opportunities
And that
are.
wasn't admonishment. I'm just,
No,
it's just
but
the
it's
way
changing.
we talk.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. I got it. But it's changing. But I think we need to think in terms of that we're not stuck. That Hollywood, that there's starting to be ways to break Hollywood apart.
And the whole notion of Hollywood is not just that Hollywood's in LA. Hollywood's everywhere now. Hollywood's in Atlanta. Hollywood's throughout Georgia. Hollywood's in Louisiana. It's in New Mexico. But you were going to a question earlier about who's to watch as an emerging filmmaker. For me, there's not just one person, because technology has changed so much. Anybody in the business can be the very next emerging filmmaker. There is no excuse, and I understand the struggle of money, but beyond that, there is no excuse if you are a filmmaker and you have a project and you have a great script and you want to get it out to not do it yourself. People are making movies with iPhones. My son is 11 and he wants to host his whole YouTube channel himself and makes videos and stuff. And Lord, sometimes he's filming and I'm walking through the house and I don't know if I'm dressed properly. I'm like, Justin, turn that off. But anyway, but I mean, 11-year-olds are making movies and editing them. So there's really no excuse, even if you say, well, I have a budget of $100,000 and I only have $20,000. Well, you take that $20,000 and you start. Don't let it sit and collect dust. Don't put that script on the back burner. And then just take a little bit more time, because this is your film and you're the filmmaker, and raise a little bit more money and get that capital and put in the project and film some more, or do whatever you need to do. But there's no excuse if you are a filmmaker, if you have a script, to be sitting and waiting to get the green light from Hollywood, to be sitting and waiting to penetrate the right person in Hollywood. I did my very first play, I wrote it as a sitcom. And I wrote it back when reality shows were starting to take over. So that meant the black sitcom was diminishing. Therefore, the people that I had in Hollywood as insiders couldn't even get my script looked at, right? So I decided to take that script that was meant to be a sitcom and I produced it as a play. And then that led to my second play, which became a movie, which Tashina is in, The Great Divide. So don't sit and wait. And make sure you go look up y'all go look up The Great Divide.
Let me ask a question of the professor. What we're concerned about is that next generation of filmmaker and being supportive of that generation. It must be so overwhelming, though, to have these great ideas and not have the network to necessarily either find crowdfunding for projects, etc. How are your students trying to get their content ideas on air of some sort, or get people to watch their content?
Are you asking?
Yes.
Again, I'm sorry, folks. Seriously, to me, fantasy is one thing, reality is another thing. And black folks prefer fantasy because reality needs a little bit ferocity to take it on. You can't be flimsy with reality. That's the problem with black people in Africa, Brazil, here. We don't want to take it the way we should take it. So we have all this voodoo hoodoo discussion that has nothing to do with reality. And I'm sorry to be disruptive, because for me, for example, you take visual literacy that you asked first. Black people, if there's anything, the most highly developed part of black people is imagination. From Africa to its enslavement, otherwise you can't justify jazz, a high culture. White people didn't even know what it was and called it coon music. We live in a world where we participate in undermining the imagination of the best of black people because we as elites have failed to be culturally transformed. That's the issue. To me, the black elite fails black imagination.
I'll give that
Okay, now, excuse me, it's not necessary, that's part of the problem here. For me, we create images, but if we have double masters as we write the scene, should I appease white people? As I tell my mama's story, suddenly we get the same stereotype of Driving Miss Daisy by a black filmmaker, not anymore by a white filmmaker. What is that about? It's about that blackness is not enough. Being black is not a license for all the black people that have perished. In the first place, you cannot discuss culture as a job, like waitressing, working at this, Congress. It's not a job. Telling the story of black people is not a job. I do gardening. I teach at Howard to make films. I didn't go to Hollywood because I knew what that animal is all about. I didn't have to wait, go experience. I left my friends and came to Howard. As I teach, I make movies. Why? I don't want anybody, even black people, to commandeer my imagination to tell a story that I didn't intend to tell a story about. So for me, to be a black writer, script writer, a young person in America, the disastrous pressure in his head is, who should I appease? Silently, which perverts your script writing, perverts your birthing canal. So as far as I'm concerned, please excuse me. I just came from the Seminole celebration. I'm doing a film on black maroons who run away, who will scare all of you, who run away without white people, not the Underground Railroad that white people and black people like, but these are black people who were self-agencyed their freedom all the way to Oklahoma, Arkansas, to Texas, and now they're in Mexico speaking in Spanish and waiting for us, for people like young people to come and tell their story. I have no right to compromise this story. It's not a job. I'll wash dishes and make movies. And that's how I started. I did gardening at UCLA to do Bush Mama. Sankofa had money that I did the gardening for. So I'm saying, please, it's very oppressive to talk about slavery, to talk about our history, and then make it look like a job application. I think I have good friends in Hollywood. I do. They're working. Clearly work. Get your money. With the money you have, what are you doing is the next issue. Didn't you say you're going to make your grandmother's story that was never told? But suddenly she's cooking for Miss Daisy? I don't get it. Because audience, we say white people are important. No, white people, the gutsy white people will cross over. And let me tell you, when we did Sankofa, I didn't care if even black people crossed over. You were not even my master. Because I would have perverted and put some sex or something I think you like to see. No. So white people cannot continue to be spoiled that a Chicano film is made to appease them. So we create a servant and a master. The usual combination. Divided loyalty on our culture, untold story. At least Hollywood told, white people told for 100 years, they told their own story, making Native American savages, calling them savages in their movies. The descendants of that Native American has to make 1 million films to come into to level of the playing field. So I'm saying, excuse me, it's very oppressive to confuse job. Black people are crazy. They would say, well, this is my lifestyle is for all black people. Excuse me, that works for you. There's a professor who says interracial is the future of black people. I say, no, my brother, it works for you, but it's not a prescription for all black people. Let's stop making prescription on our personal experience. 100 years of oppression of white racism in cinema cannot be negotiated because you want to eat and hobnob with them. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Finally, when I finished Sankofa, white people said, this is an art film, black people cannot see it. White people said, this is an art film. My wife said, no, it's a film. They called it an art film because they wanted to categorize it. And black people came out in miles to see this film, to disprove the idea of black people wouldn't get it. Every HBO said black people wouldn't get it. What do you know about black people? Black people lined up, made Sankofa a world phenomenon all the way to South Africa and Europe. Black people. Black people that go to church every day. Reverend right in Chicago lined up for weeks Southside Chicago to see that film. Now, a white man who knows black people very well came to me at Magic Johnson Theater. It's the best place to tell it because the Black Caucus Week is good. He comes and says to me, excuse me, you are messing up the distribution. I'll get you $50 million to really run it right. And he told me, I'll make the Black Caucus come on the steps of the Capitol and endorse your film. I called Charles Burnett, I went to film school with. I called other folks. I said, I was going to say to him bye, but I said, no, I want black people to hear this because nobody would believe me. I got 4 or 5 filmmakers in a cafe. I told them, you have to say the same thing you said to me to my partners. He said it verbatimly. I'll make Black Caucus on the steps of the Capitol endorse your film. That is the tragedy. Black Caucus, when we made that film, made history, didn't have my wife or me to discuss about cinema and alternative independent film. No. In fact, this is why I really was fascinated. Should I go? Shouldn't I go? That's what I was. I was in a very schizophrenic because I'm editing a film about the Italian-Ethiopian War. I'm doing that film 4 hours with my own money and my wife's money together in our bookstore at Sankofa. We're doing it. I'm doing the Maroon documentary film. There's not a gutsy black capitalist that steps forward and says, you know what, those runaways from Dismal Swamp that ended up in South Carolina, that ended up in Florida, Fort Mose, to Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mexico. I was in Brackettsville talking to your I'm sure some of you are related to them. They speak 3 languages, Gullah, Spanish, and English. Who is going to tell their story? Compromisers who want to appease 2 husbands? Okay? White people? No, even black people cannot be bosses of the imagination of a black artist. You have to be truthful and let black people face with that hot potato. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions from the audience. Right here. Wait, I think we have a mic coming.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Okay. While the congressman is coming to the podium, can we recognize Babu? Babu, could you please stand, please? Pan-African Film Festival. I mean, thank you so much.
You know what, Victoria? There have been so many dues payers who have come along before me upon whose shoulders I stand. And those are the people who really we should stand for. And you yourself are among them, even though you're younger than myself. But you have helped to blaze a trail on TV in the business of TV. Your example of standing up, standing alone, and standing strong, and with a powerful voice speaking truth to power, that's something that we all stand on the shoulders of. So I want to thank you for being a part of this panel. I did not know that you and Tachina Arnold were friends. I guess I probably should have figured it out because you're cut from the same cloth.
Well, all black women in Hollywood know each other.
Well, you know, I should have assumed that. And since you're such good friends, I know you've been fighting a fight. I know you've been fighting the same fight that Mr. Harima has been fighting. Garima. Mr. Garima. And what he said is what compelled me to come at this time, so I'm sorry for interrupting you as you were getting ready to ask your question. What you said is what caused me or propelled me to come up and interrupt at this time, because I'm so happy that you chose to accept our invitation to come. And perhaps this is some small atonement for the lack of attention that has been paid to the storytelling of our people up to this time. And I feel your rage, I feel your passion. It's been bottled up for so long, and I'm happy that you got a chance to unleash on this audience and to get that out of you. I want to give you a hand for what you have meant to us and what our story is. So I want us all to stand and give him a hand. Give him a hand. Stand. as far as Felix Sanchez, who is here, he appeared on my panel yesterday on this same topic, diversity in film and TV production. And he was a panelist last week at a discussion that we had in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, on Capitol Hill, where we got a chance to bring some young staffers in. If you don't know Congress, you should know that staffers, Congress people may not hear the real story, but if we can get to staffers, then they can take the message on to their bosses and do things that even their bosses don't do, because the bosses are relying upon them, and so they are very powerful. So we opened this discussion up in Congress with staffers, but Felix Sanchez, who co-founder of the National Hispanic Foundation for the Arts, is a man who knows this business. He looks at it through the eyes of a Latino, and I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that when we put Latinos and African Americans and Asians together, the word minority should not even come across our minds, because we're actually the majority. And when you look at the viewership and the patronage of this industry, you'll find our outsized influence. And so, to think of ourselves as minorities is almost what the intended result has been of the way that we have been portrayed and the way that we have been left out from the storytelling ourselves. So I want to thank Felix for being here. Miss Jaylene Mack, cut from a little different cloth, a lawyer, an entertainment lawyer. We went to the same law school, by the way, Thurgood Marshall School of Law, Texas Southern University, Houston, Texas, and HBCU.
And it's HBCU week.
And as all three of the females, a mother, a wife, carrying on a law practice while engaged in that creative sphere that is trapped within so many of us, within all of us, actually. We all have that creativity. But I want to thank you for being here. And last but not least, Carter Pilcher, who is you may think of him as a Caucasian or white man, but he's actually a red man. So I consider him to be a minority too. But even if he is not in color, if you don't accept his color, you must accept his heart. Because it was in part because of our discourse that I was propelled to create the Caste Caucus, which is a congressional caucus through which we will continue to fight to address the issues that the panelists are educating us about today. Last but not least, I want to thank my good friend, Reverend Jesse Jackson, a man who has borne the brunt of misportrayal in the press, which is a part of the media, television and film production, creativity, all of that is cross-owned, and they work together. And Jesse Jackson, who's a man that I have supported throughout my adult years, has been a victim of it, but yet he has been a survivor and a winner in it, especially when you consider his opening the door for Barack Obama to be able to become president of the United States. So having said all of that, I'm going to sit down now, but I just could not help but to come up and say that I feel you, and we're going to do better on Capitol Hill.
I think we had a question up here.
Yes. Hi, my name is Tatiana Lee. I am from accessiblehollywood.com, and I am an accessibility blogger and activist as well as an actor. And actually, I'm attending this year on behalf of the World Institute on Disability. And my question I have for you guys is, what are your thoughts about including people with disabilities of color in front of and behind the camera? And have you thought about the impact it would have, and what are you doing to support that?
Well, I think it's absolute, and it's brilliant. For me, it's not just about hiring people in front of the camera, but also behind the camera, whether it be a learning disability or an incapacity of varying types. You know, a disability isn't necessarily visual. It can be a mental illness. It can be a learning disability. And so my production company, Days Ferry Productions, does engage. We also combat ageism. We also do hire behind the camera, in particular with the crew with a learning disability. Strata. And oftentimes what's interesting is that a person that suffers from ADHD zeroes in on the task that the DP may give that particular crew member, because that is sort of the nature of that particular disability. So one employee that I have, the DP, who was also Oliver Stone's, one of his DPs, African-American Keith L. Smith, was like, wow, she was really good. So that's what I do. I don't necessarily want to make a big deal out of it because it doesn't need to be, right? It just is. And that this person has the capacity to do the job, and therefore you have the job, so.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Henry Taylor, and I am not part of the industry. I came because I was looking at the workshops as minorities redefining ourselves. The key word there is ourselves. And I guess really what I want to know is, what do we call ourselves? I've heard a lot from the panel, we, us, our, people of color. Are you saying that regardless of where you are, if you have excessive pigmentation or dark skin, we're the same people? Then on the other side of that, for those of us who have white parents, are they part of our people? So I came for clarification, and I haven't quite got there yet. Maybe you can help me.
That's the whole point. We are everything. There's so many stories, and this is what we discuss in the writer's room on survivor's remorse. My character has a lesbian daughter, and we talk about it in a way where it's not about her being a lesbian. It's the fact I have a daughter, and me as her mom is raising her the best way that that's the premise around the story. It's not about her being a lesbian. It's not about her being fair-skinned. It's not about my son being, I mean, I think Girls Trip, and I use Girls Trip, the movie, as an example. It's like, we finally saw a movie where, I mean, it had its campy parts, but literally black women in the audience, it was like, oh my God, that happens to me. There's so many stories to tell. And because we're so diverse in color, and we're so diverse in backgrounds, and and I always thought about that. I said, I had to tell my biracial friends, I said, I'm sorry for not considering your mother. Your mother's white. So what story do you have? And these are the stories that we gather, because we do exclude a lot of ourselves. Yes. Pardon me? I didn't want to talk about. No. But we're so many things. That's a very good question. And I think because we do exclude each other as people, we come in all shapes and sizes, and we have to consider that. We do. And we have to do better at considering the other side.
And it is a complexity, because we have to deal with the ism within our own race. And one of the characters in The Rich and the Ruthless is Willie Turner, played by the marvelous Michael Collier. And on camera, he plays 3 different characters on the same show, because black men and black actors are dispensable, disposable in Hollywood. That the casting directors aren't black typically. Typically, there are a few. But, okay, let's hire another black actress. Let's hire another, that we are replaceable in a very easy way. However, people of color have our stars and Hollywood has their stars. So people don't understand when we race to someone and an executive said, what? There is that. But back to the ism, I was very specific about hiring Mikkel Shannon Jenkins, who's like molasses in his voice and in his color. And it was very important to me, because I went to a CBS executive and I said, you know, you have 2.5 black people on this show. He said, what are you talking about? I said, everyone you've hired is mulatto, including myself. I said, so what's up with that? Where are the Chocolate Brothers? Like, where are we? And I get to say that, and anyone else can say it. It's my truth. But I said, everyone is mixed race. What is that? Is it the lighting? Is it the makeup? Is it the hair? Like, what is this really about? Because you don't want to hire a black hairstylist. You don't have a black makeup artist. You don't, when I came in there, you know the makeup they had in that drawer in 1991 was Negress Brown. Wow. So believe me, I had my work cut out for me. And I went toe to toe, all right? So yeah, we have many stories to tell. I'll leave it there.
As the, excuse me, if I could add, sir.
Sir, are you with us?
Yeah. Sorry, just one other little point. And as the one guy who doesn't fit in any of those.
Could you move the mic closer to you?
Okay. As the one guy who doesn't fit in any of those categories, I think it's really about the stories. You know, we're all people whose passion is to create and deliver amazing stories. And really that's where we are. So it's not about, is it a completely African-American story or is it a Jamaican story? But it's about giving everybody an opportunity to create their stories and the skills to make the stories, because that's what really makes us rich. If you look at a guy like Barry Jenkins. Barry Jenkins won the Academy Award this past year for Moonlight. And he has made a lot of short films. And probably if you look at his film Moonlight technically, it probably was not the best technical story, but it was an amazing story, and he brought it from an amazing, passionate place. And that's really what we're about, and nobody cares what his background is. You know, it's an amazing story that we haven't heard. So I think that the issue is developing a structure that allows these stories that each person here in each family, each mother, grandmother, each young director, young filmmaker has, that gives them a chance to tell that story in the way they most want to, in the way they best can. That's the difference. Because every story is going to be different.
We have another question.
Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Vincent, and I'm from a small town called Lawrenceville, Virginia. And I know Ms. Mark was saying how if you wanted to be a filmmaker, now is the time and you can do it in any way. Well, using social media as a mark. So my question would be, how would you help someone like me who lives in a small town, social media is amazing, but I have a horrible internet connection. And I'm trying to get my mark out, and it's not just me, it's people everywhere in rural communities as mine. Reverend Jesse Jackson was just in Emporia, which is the town right over from mine. Everybody is suffering in my area from having lack of proper internet. Now, in some places where we are, we do have the internet that we need. But for me, I sat down with the congressman. He was about to run for office, and I'm a waitress and a head manager at a restaurant. And he sat down with me, he came in, he talked, and I had the opportunity to talk with him, and I did something called At the Table with Tiffany. It was spur of the moment, knocked it out. Do you know it took me about a day just to get the interview to load? That's the type of internet that I'm dealing with. So, for someone who's like me in the area that I live in, what would be your advice to get myself out there, to get noted? Because I was a field producer. I went to Bowie State University, field producer at Bowie State University, amazing, great. I didn't get picked up right away. Everything didn't work out for me the way I planned it, but I know how God works, so we're not worried about that. But I've been out of that for about 4 years, and I'm afforded to still be able to do PR work for my job and all that good stuff. Radio personality for a little bit, thank God. But as far as my resume, if I don't have that mark, how could you help me get into the office with you guys, or sit at the table with you all to become the up-and-coming producer, to become the writer, to become the director? Because that's what I want to do, and I know with God's will I'll get there. But for other people who are not like me, or who don't have the same faith or the same get up and go, what would you advise them to do? How would you advise them?
Yeah. Well, you have a couple of problems. One, you got to talk to your internet provider to start with. As far as your connection, right? Keeping it real. But secondly, don't overlook the resources in your state or in your region. Now, if you're in a country town, you got to get in your car and go somewhere else, right? But you can check to see if your state has a film commission, or if the next major city next to you has a film commission. Don't forget about your local universities, you know, your community colleges, your junior colleges, your four-year universities. Most oftentimes they have communication departments. Even their...
And I've been working on that too.
Okay.
I'm an alum of Southside Community College. I'm trying to help us get a communications department.
It's nothing like networking with like minds. So you got to go online, go on Facebook, all these places, find the people who are having mixers and screenings, and go to film festivals. But also, as far as your technical equipment, just basic internet, see if your state should have a workforce center that you can go to and get on their computers and whatnot. So trust me, you may have to get in your car, and may have to do a little bit more research, but I think your resources are there, even if you're having technical problems.
May I say before that, I want to apologize for being caught in the overlapping workshops and having to hop and skip, but highly disturbed me in a good way, in the sense that we're all in search of your question, who are we? And there's this assumption that we often drop, that we are not white people, we're African people. And I look at you, Juliet, you're so indigenous, with them high cheekbones. You know, Columbus didn't get here, he didn't discover, he found. 400 years of Native Americans here before even the slave trade started. And there's a whole lot, and from the perspective of the exterminated group is the ultimate story to be told. Not even just the African story, because when we got here, we got here to cultivate the land, they'd already cleaned out the people. And the depth of that story is a story yet to be told. And lastly, what I think, Holly, what you hit me is that we tend, on our best day, to see the world through a keyhole, not through a door. And that's the struggle. How do we see the world through a keyhole, not through? Most people in the world today, half all people are Asian, half of them are Chinese. The whole world, 1/8 African, 1/4 Nigerian. Most people in the world are yellow, brown, black, non-Christian, poor, female, young, and don't speak English. So based upon that, the minority really is out. It doesn't ring with the truth. It's fake news. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd also like to recognize Representative Terry Sewell from Alabama, who's just joined us as well. Do we have another question?
Hi, my name is Sawatha Henry. I'm from Houston, Texas. To address some of the things the professor said, or the question I have, is there a legitimate concern that Hollywood doesn't want to produce our stories? Example, Birth of a Nation with Nate Parker. It was on the road to get all these awards. It was just, everyone wanted to go see it. It was brutal, it was raw, there was no white savior. And then all of a sudden his past comes out to hunt him, and then the film just disappeared. Is that a legitimate concern of someone who wants to tell those type of stories, that they have to worry about their past or what could possibly be said about them to destroy the film process or the film being released or getting funded?
Those are always tactics to stop you. It's like slavery. Slave runs away, gets his foot cut off to tell all the other slaves not to run. Gotta keep going.
Gotta keep going.
You gotta keep going.
Gotta keep going.
You can't let that stop you. And unfortunately, some of us will be made examples of. You gotta fight it. Every day is a constant fight.
Every day.
Every day is a constant fight.
Yeah, and as Victoria pointed out, even before, when you're trying to get the green light, you sometimes get trumped, in some ways where they nitpick and try to find ways not to get your production done. So to me, it doesn't matter what level you are in the process. You never know when somebody's going to hit you out the blue to pull that, that rug off from under you and to stunt the progress of the film. But again, you just got to keep going forward.
And with Nate Parker, he made a decision, and it was an incredible feat. I mean, the end of that movie blew my mind, but just the way it was, the cinematography and the way he did it, the narrative. But, he had two choices, and he went with Fox. He went with a big distributor for $20 million, right? For, a bigger distribution deal. I'm not mad at him, right? But also there trying to get the deal for $17 million was Byron Allen. And Byron wanted that movie. And probably if Byron got the movie, the press wouldn't have chased Nate and this alleged past. But because Nate was going in the jaws of the shark, they could not allow this brother to have that level of success as an independent filmmaker on a $20 million ticket. They weren't going to let him do it, and so they didn't.
Well,
Byron Allen won his lawsuit in 2015 against AT&T. Right, okay, thank you.
I just want to say, first you have to know the origin of Hollywood. For over 100 years, what it is it's about a settler psyche, settler culture, a culture that came about by a race. It custom designed itself as white. If you go to Germany even now, you don't find white race, you find Germans. If you go to England, Dutch, everywhere you go in Europe, you find people from that country. It's only in America there's a white race. It custom designed itself to actually erase the Native American history, because all wars begin with story. Whose story? The Palestinian-Israeli war is a story. All stories are war zones. So in Hollywood, there's a perpetuation of 100 years history of white supremacy, white idea of beauty, white idea of good hair, good nose, good lips. The vocabulary of the cinematic language itself is contaminated by the idea of white supremacy for over 100 years. Even when black people talk about she is or he is a sex symbol, they're operating in the grammar of white supremacy. Therefore, those of us who come from outside, when we should propose an alternative culture based on our experience, we begin to play the same role. It's like our beauty idea still is deformed. We don't want to admit it. But when we say she's attractive, our desire is contaminated. Men's desire, women's desire itself is tampered psychologically. So you are dealing with 100 years of colonialization of our mind from Africa, Brazil to here. So when you come as a camera to come enter that story, you're coming into a booby trap of white supremacy's cultural idea. And so for me, constantly what we're complaining on personal level, what happened to us, has a lot to do with a historical legacy. In Hollywood, even if you look at white filmmakers, for example, an actor called Burt Lancaster, he made movie, one for Hollywood, one for himself. One for Hollywood, one for himself. You go back to the 1940, 1930, African Americans made their own movies, but at the same time still, their idea of beauty was from white supremacy. So for me, the idea is, if we say we want to make a movie, but we want to perpetuate the same thing, there's no change. So to me, it's flawed. Even the script writing idea, this 3-act stuff, once you buy the idea, you're in trouble. I'll just tell you one thing and stop. A woman in Brackettville, Texas, a black woman said to me, she don't like her story, the story of the black Seminoles, to be told as hero stories, because she feels it covers the human story and the tragedy, because when you create a hero, you begin to operate on a different perspective. And she was an ordinary black woman. And when I was interviewing her, everybody thought she was like, oh, she's crazy. But she was saying the best thing, because our idea of heroism is changing the dress. Women are in the same entrapment where the skirt is really what changes. Essentially, it is the white man's idea of heroism that is now manifested through a woman. So the essence is not changed. For me, I think the world expects something better from us, meaning our imagination should produce a more humanist, a less divisive cultural manifestation. And this is what's embroiled in there.
Thank you. Yes, this is going to be a brief question. I'm Barbara Campbell from Atlanta area, and we have a lot of film producers coming in our area now. In particular, they're coming to churches, and mine in particular. What are some things we should be looking out for when they come and ask, can we use your church for a film?
From a liability standpoint, or from?
Are you concerned about the liability? What should you get? Protection you should get, or?
Well, one thing, most would go to a church to shoot because they need a location. And producers have location agreements. And typically in those agreements, you want to make sure that there's insurance involved. Obviously, there may or may not be a fee. Maybe just a barter situation, in-kind service. But, typically you're giving a filmmaker the license to use the logos, the name of the business, actually the name of the church. Now, unless it's a story particularly about the church, then that's something else, if there needs to be an exchange, in terms of a story rights or something of that nature. But if it's specifically about the venue itself, that's usually covered under the location agreement.
But one
if
thing,
they are young people,
if
they are young black filmmakers, do help them, give them everything free, be extra in their movie, bake pies for them, sell the pies, and add in their capital so their film production value raises up.
And I think I think that's exactly the right way. If we're going to create new young stories, we just have to help them. I think you should make sure, we do only short movies, and we have literally hundreds of young people making films in amazing locations that they find themselves. But you should always make sure that they are on the hook to repair or replace anything that gets out of order.
But if they're from Hollywood and stars, charge them big so you could give the money to a black filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Oh no. Latricia, folks.
Right here. I think.
Latricia, folks. Atlanta. Can you hear me? Atlanta, Georgia.
Can't hear you.
Testing.
Yes, Latricia folks out of Atlanta, Georgia. But I was just compelled, and the gentleman is not here anymore, when he said, what do we call ourselves? And there was a statement that we are everything. I have a problem with that statement because when there's so much focus on African Americans, I mean, we're the ones being pulled over and not really having a good turnout from police. I think that we should have a focus about putting the humanity back in our faces with these stories. So, you know, great for the lesbians, but the bottom line is we have a unique problem in America. And if anyone wants to join in with those stories, awesome, great. But I do have a problem when people say, well, we're everything, we're so much, and, you know, don't be so narrow-minded. Excuse me. Let's look at what's going on with my black brothers, okay? And this is not anything that's funny or cute. I travel in IT back and forth. My mother sitting next to me, you know what she says? I used to be able to drive. She's like, oh my gosh. That's what my mother says to me, so I need people to tell stories about me. I need people to put the humanity, because apparently people have taken the humanity out of us. As black people, we need to be careful with saying those type of things. We're everything, everybody, come along, let's go. That's great, but we're not there yet. So, thank you.